a quiet southern town, a black diner owner served coffee to a Hell's Angel that nobody wanted around. Not long after, two police officers entered the diner and insulted both of them. Tensions rose. The officers reached for their guns, but the owner stood her ground. She defended the biker and kicked the officers out of her diner. That one moment changed everything. The town turned its back on her, but what happened next surprised everyone. It started like any other morning. The sun hadn't yet crested the ridge behind Elkridge. A faint blue light washed over cracked sidewalks and shuttered stores. Fog clung to the trees like it didn't want to let go. Inside Illa's table, the only black-owned diner for miles, the lights buzzed to life. Illa Brooks stood behind the counter. She took a deep breath, the kind you take before facing another hard day. She wore her mother's old apron, frayed but clean. Her braids were neatly tied back. Her eyes, heavy with quiet exhaustion, scanned the room. Only $34 in the register. Again. She brewed the first pot of coffee. Bills weighed on her mind. Electricity, her father's medication, hospital deposits. She poured herself a cup and sat by the window. Main Street was still. The hardware store had been closed for 2 years. The factory shut down last winter. Only the gas station remained, run by a couple who hadn't smiled at her since she was 10. The diner used to be the heart of the town when her mother, Gloria Brooks, was alive. People laughed there, shared meals, had real conversations. But after Gloria passed and Illa took over, the mood shifted. Some stopped coming. Others smiled tight, offered forced compliments. A few made it clear she didn't belong. Everyday struggles. She opened her father's care notebook. Stroke recovery, therapy schedules, overdue bills. She remembered the night she had to carry him from the house. He could no longer speak or walk. The man who once lifted her onto his shoulders now couldn't hold a fork. The bell above the door rang. Pete, an old trucker, came in. He didn't speak, just nodded and sat in his usual booth. She brought him coffee. That was it. He used to be one of many regulars. Now he was the only one. Time passed. No second customer came. Illa wiped down tables just to stay busy. The radio played an old soul tune her mother used to hum. She sang along quietly. Then came a knock. Not at the door, but the window. 2 boys. They laughed, ran off. When Illa looked, she saw what they had written in the fog on the glass. Go back to where you came from. She didn't cry, didn't yell, just wiped it off with her apron like she had 100 times before. Pete left without a word, not even a tip. That afternoon she made eggs for lunch, the last ones she had. Teenagers passed by the window, giggling, but never came in. She ignored it. She sat at the counter, looked at an old photo of her and her mother in aprons, smiling. It was from the day they repainted the diner, back when she still used the word hope. Then came the boy and the officer. 3 weeks earlier, something happened that changed everything. Illa had just stepped outside to take out the trash when she saw a police cruiser across the street. A black teenager, maybe 16, was pressed against the hood. His backpack was torn open. A sandwich and notebooks lay on the sidewalk. Officer Brent Hollis gripped the boy's wrist tightly, one hand on his holstered gun. Illa walked over quickly. "Brent, what's going on?" He looked suspicious, Brent said. "Just hanging around the hardware store." "He's a kid," Illa replied. "They linger." "That doesn't make them a threat." Brent's voice got lower. "You questioning me now?" "I'm asking why a 16-year-old needs to be slammed against a car hood," she said. Brent stepped closer, trying to intimidate her. "You'd better remember your place." "I do," Illa said. "It's behind the counter of the business I built with my mother." Not watching a child get humiliated on my sidewalk, Brent let the boy go, shoving his backpack into his chest. The boy didn't speak. He just picked up his things and disappeared down the street. By the end of the week, the gossip had spread. People stopped coming to the diner. Someone even slid a receipt under the door with 2 words scribbled in red, "Watch yourself." The man in the leather jacket. Back in the present, the bell rang again. She expected the mailman, but when she looked up, she saw a man in a worn leather jacket. His beard was salt and pepper. His pale blue eyes looked tired. The Hell's Angels patch on his jacket stood out immediately. The room tensed. He sat quietly at the counter. "Coffee? Black," he said. His voice was rough. His hand trembled. A hospital band peeked from beneath his sleeve. "My daughter's at Elkridge General," he explained. "She's 15, stage 4. I needed a break from the machines." Illa nodded. "You want something to eat?" "If I make people uncomfortable, I can leave," he said. "You're here. You're human." "That's enough," she replied. He ordered brisket and cornbread. She noticed the tattoo on his arm. Jesse, his daughter's name. "You're a good dad," she told him. Then the police came back. The bell rang again. Officer Brent walked in, with Deputy Ellen Fox behind him. Brent spotted the biker and smirked. "Didn't expect to see one of them here." Sam didn't respond. Brent demanded ID. His hand drifted toward his gun. That's when Illa stepped in. "He hasn't broken any laws. He paid for his food." "He's a customer," Brent sneered. "You know who he is." "I know he's sitting here quietly drinking coffee. You came in here to provoke him. I won't allow that. You want to pick this fight again?" "I'm not picking a fight. I'm standing up." Eventually, Brent took Sam's ID, checked it, found nothing. No warrants, no reason to arrest him. Frustrated, he left. Illa turned back to Sam. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "Thank you. Most people look away." "I used to," she said. "Not anymore." The consequences. The next morning, the town looked the same. But something had shifted. A cardboard sign was nailed to her front door. "No criminal sympathizers." Big black letters dripping down the board. Inside, the power was out. So was the water. Still, she made coffee on a gas burner and sat by the window. Eggs, tomatoes, and slurs were thrown at the window that afternoon. Laughter echoed from a passing car. Illa stood still, then began cleaning. Slowly, one smear at a time. She added dignity to her to-do list. Underneath it, she wrote, "Still mine." Later, Miss Owens from the church stopped by. "I won't come in," she said, "but not everyone agrees with how you're being treated." "And yet you weren't here yesterday," Illa said. "I was scared." "I still am," Illa said, "but I didn't get to leave." Miss Owens nodded. "I'll bring pies tomorrow." People trust sugar more than truth. Then she left. Illa stood in her clean, quiet diner. She didn't know what came next, but she knew this. She would not let anyone else decide who deserved to be treated like a human being. Not in her diner, not on her watch. The air was heavy and still. Too still. Even the cicadas had stopped their usual buzzing. Inside Layla's diner, the silence had taken on a life of its own. It lingered at every table, filled every empty coffee cup, and pressed in through the smudged windows. Illa stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, apron damp from cleaning again. The rag in her hand had dried out hours ago, but she kept wiping the counter, not because it needed it, but because she needed to move. She needed something to distract her from the tightness in her chest, the feeling of being watched, judged, forgotten. No one had come in all day, not a single customer. She hadn't even needed to brew a second pot of coffee. She told herself it didn't matter. She repeated it over and over. Doing the right thing doesn't come with applause. But somewhere inside her, a small voice she tried to ignore whispered, "Was it worth it?" Across town, in a quiet hospital room, Sam Taylor sat beside his daughter's bed. Jesse's breathing was faint. Her eyes were closed, her face pale beneath the hospital lights. Machines beeped in slow, steady intervals. Time kept moving whether he wanted it to or not. Sam leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He'd always believed in loyalty and brotherhood, but what Illa had done, that was something else. That was courage, and the way the town had turned against her for it, that was something he couldn't let stand. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he hadn't called in over a year, Marvin Taylor, his younger brother, a former combat medic, now a patched member of the Hells Angels Central Ridge chapter. Sam stared at the screen for a moment, then tapped call. "Yeah," Marvin answered. "It's me," Sam said. A pause. "Sam." Another pause, heavier this time. "Damn, you okay?" "I'm at the hospital," Sam replied. "It's Jessie." Stage 4. A long silence followed. "Damn, man, I'm sorry, she's hanging on. But that's not why I'm calling." Sam's voice tightened. "There's a woman here. A diner owner. Her name's Layla Brooks. She stood up for me when a cop tried to make an example out of me. She didn't have to, but she did. And now the town's punishing her, cutting her power, trashing her place. She's paying the price for something I did." Sam's throat burned. "I need your help." Another silence. "You want me to call the club?" Marvin asked. "No," Sam said. "I want you to bring them." The next morning the sun rose hot and harsh. Illa opened the diner at 7 o'clock, like always. She scrubbed the front door clean again, flipped the sign and tried not to look out the window. She didn't want to know who might be watching. By 8 o'clock the place was still empty. By 9 o'clock she sat at the front booth staring out the glass, trying not to break down. She didn't cry, but she thought about it. At 9:30 the bell above the door rang. She stood quickly, too quickly, and wiped her hands on her apron. A man stepped inside, tall, lean, with a worn black vest and small, neatly stitched patches. His beard was trimmed, his face calm. "Miss Brooks?" he asked. Illa hesitated. "Yes?" "I'm Marvin Taylor, Sam's younger brother." Her face softened, but she stayed behind the counter. "Is Jessie—" she began. "She's still fighting," Marvin said. "That girl's tough." Illa nodded, her voice caught. Marvin looked around the empty diner, then walked to the window. "How long has it been like this?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Since the day after your brother came in," she finally said. Marvin nodded slowly, then pulled a small radio from his pocket. "Let's fix that," he said, pressing a button. He spoke a single word. "Now." Illa tilted her head, confused. Then she heard it, a low rumble, at first distant like thunder, then louder and louder. She stepped to the window, thinking her mind must be playing tricks, but it wasn't. Motorcycles, dozens of them, then more. Chrome flashed in the sun, engines echoed off storefronts. Main Street filled with bikes from end to end, some sleek and black, others wild with flags and color. One by one, they parked. Over 200 bikes, then 300 riders. Leather vests, patches from different cities. Some held helmets, others stood still like they were part of something sacred. Illa stood frozen. Marvin turned to her. "We ride for our own," he said, "and we remember those who stand up for them when no one else will." One by one, the bikers stepped inside the diner. No mockery, no judgment, just quiet nods. Presence. The bell above the door jingled again and again. Marvin handed her a sealed envelope. "From the brothers," he said, "to cover what the town took." Inside, receipts, power restored, food restocked, a new coffee machine ordered, and a handwritten note from someone named Red Dog. "You fed our brother when nobody else would. Now let us feed yours." Illa looked around. Her chest tightened, but not with fear, with warmth. For the first time in days, she felt something return. Hope. Out the window, the street buzzed, not with anger, but with loyalty, gratitude, community. And in that moment, she realized something. Loyalty doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears leather, and sometimes when the world turns its back on you, the roar of 300 engines is the loudest thank you you'll ever hear. That morning, Elkridge smelled different, not just of heat or exhaust or silence. It smelled like coffee, bacon, leather, and change. The main road stayed packed. Riders from everywhere, reapers of mercy, southern knuckleheads, Hell's Angels. Some slept in vans, others in motels. Most stayed because they wanted to. Illa barely slept, not from fear, from awe. Inside the diner, the bell hadn't stopped ringing since 6:30. Illa moved non-stop, refilling mugs, calling out orders, her apron stained, her hands steady. What had started with one plate of brisket had become something else, something alive. She handed a plate to a biker, then turned and froze. Mrs. Ruth Langley, hair pinned tight, beige cardigan, purse clutched close. The same woman who once whispered that she missed the days when people knew their place. Now she sat in a booth across from a biker in a sleeveless vest, tattoos on both arms. The woman was showing Ruth how to knit, and Ruth, she was laughing. Not polite, not nervous, real laughter. Illa blinked. She handed off the coffee pot and walked over, unsure. Ruth looked up. Their eyes met. "Morning, Miss Brooks," Ruth said, lifting her teacup. Illa said nothing. The biker smiled. "She's learning to make fingerless gloves," she said, "for her coffee mug." Ruth chuckled. "Told her if I'm going to sit with someone covered in tattoos, I might as well learn something useful." Illa smiled. Just a little. No speeches, no declarations. Just two people figuring it out. Outside, children ran between motorcycles, laughed, played. One boy climbed onto a Harley. A biker crouched beside him and helped him sit safely. No lectures, just kindness. The bell rang again. Deputy Ellen Fox walked in. No badge, no uniform, just jeans and a tired face. "Coffee?" Illa asked evenly. "Black, no sugar," Illa poured. Their fingers brushed. "Thank you," Ellen said. "Really?" Illa asked. Ellen looked down. "I heard what they did to your place," she said. "I should have stopped it." "You didn't throw the eggs," Illa replied. "No, but I stood still while others did. I'm not proud of that." Silence. Illa reached for a biscuit, still warm, and set it in front of her. "Eat," she said. Ellen looked up, surprised. "Talking's easier on a full stomach," Illa added. Ellen smiled, just a little. The day went on. Illa kept moving, refilling coffee, handing out plates, giving nods and smiles, but her mind kept returning to the small things. Ruth, Jacob, Ellen. It wasn't a miracle, not yet, but it was something, a start. Change doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it's just two people sharing a booth, a kid on a bike, a deputy without her badge. Illa paused by her father's old photo, him in the same spot, apron stained, kind eyes. "You were right, Daddy," she whispered. "People can surprise you." Then she went back to work. Because the world doesn't change in one moment. It changes one table at a time. "I'm Dominic," he said, "president of the Hell's Angels Riverside chapter." Illa nodded. "I've heard of you." He nodded back. "I've heard of you too." His voice carried more than politeness. It held pride. Dominic turned to the room and raised his hand. The diner went silent. He didn't need to shout. His voice was steady, and every word carried weight. "There are two things we live by," he said, "loyalty and respect. When someone gives us either, we give it back. And when someone risks everything to do what's right, we remember." He turned back to Illa. This woman didn't know who we were. Didn't care about the patch we wore. All she saw was a man in pain, and she treated him like a human being. When others turned away, she stepped forward. He reached into a canvas bag that Marvin handed him. "I don't give these out often." He pulled out a black leather vest, carefully folded. The stitching was fresh. Across the back, in bold white thread, "Friend of the Hell's Angels," and below it, in smaller red script, "Protected." Ila's breath caught in her chest. She stood, frozen. Dominic held the vest out to her. "From this day forward," he said, "Layla's table rides under the protection of the Hells Angels." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Fists pounded tables, boots stomped the floor, and voices echoed in celebration. Ila stood still, eyes brimming. Dominic leaned in close and said softly, "You earned this." Not with fear, with decency, and that means more than any patch ever could. She took the vest slowly, reverently, her fingers tracing the letters. Around her, the noise continued, but she barely heard it. Then she noticed something else. Familiar faces, locals, stepping inside. People who hadn't returned since the trouble began. Joe Larkin and his daughter Elise. Ruth Langley's son. A few others followed, hesitant but present. Joe walked up first, hat in hand. I was wrong," he said, voice rough. "I saw what happened and didn't say a thing." "I'm sorry." Ila looked into his eyes. They were sincere and scared. She gave a slow nod. Elise reached out and touched Ila's arm. "My mom says you used to give me free apple slices when I was little." She never forgot that more people came forward. Some whispered apologies, others just nodded. But they came. That meant something. Ila stood tall, holding the vest. She walked behind the counter and found a place for it next to her father's old photo, the one where he stood smiling behind the grill. She hung the vest there, on a wooden peg. It looked like it belonged. She turned back to the room, now filled with faces that felt like allies. Her chest lifted. Dominic raised his cup toward Ila. The room followed. "To Ila." And in that moment, no one thought about race, reputation, or politics. They remembered something deeper, character, and who had the courage to stand up when it mattered. Ila nodded, not dramatically, just once, calm, grounded, full of quiet grace. Because real honor doesn't come from titles. It comes from how you stand when standing costs you everything. The next morning, the bell above the door jingled quietly. Ila was behind the counter, halfway through wiping down the pie case. Her movements were automatic, clean, rotate, check the glass. But her mind was far away, turning over the same question. What now? She didn't look up until she heard slow, deliberate footsteps, the kind that carried weight. She turned and saw Sam Taylor standing in the doorway. Same leather jacket, same broad frame, but his eyes, there was something new in them. They were clearer now, not because the pain was gone, but because something had settled beneath it. "Sam," she said softly. He stepped inside, nodded. "I was hoping you'd be here." "I'm always here," she replied with a gentle smile. He sat down at the counter and exhaled, like he'd been holding it in too long. "It looks good in here." "It's getting there," she said. "Some days are better than others." She poured him coffee, black like last time, without asking. He wrapped his hands around the mug. They didn't tremble anymore. Then he looked up. "She's improving," he said. Ila blinked. "Jessie." He nodded. "The new treatment, it's working. Her numbers are up, her color's back. She's laughing again." Ila felt her throat tighten. "That's incredible." "It is. I didn't think we'd get this far." He paused. "She asked me to come today." Ila raised her eyebrows. "She wants to meet you." Ila froze. "Me?" she said, and I quote, "That woman sounds like who I hope I can be one day." For a second, the whole diner faded. The humming refrigerator, the clatter of dishes, all of it disappeared. Ila sat down across from him without thinking. "I don't know what to say." "You already did," he said. "That day you showed up. That day you reminded me I was more than just pain, more than just a patch." He paused again. "You didn't just feed me. You made me feel visible again. And Jessie needed that more than either of us knew." Ila swallowed hard. She folded a napkin slowly in her hand. Tell her I'd love to meet her. Sam smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. She made you something. Illa opened it carefully. Inside was a drawing in colored pencil, her behind the counter, handing a mug of coffee to a man in a leather vest. Above them, in childlike handwriting, be kind, be brave. Her hands trembled, her chest ached in the best way. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You already said it. He stood to leave. She wants to come here next week. Sit by the window. Illa smiled through her tears. We'll have something special on the menu that day. Sam turned to go, but paused at the door. She's alive, he said, because someone chose kindness when they didn't have to. He nodded. Thank you. Then he stepped outside and was gone. Late evening light spilled through the windows. The last of the motorcycles rolled quietly down Main Street, not in a thunder of arrival, but in a respectful farewell. Inside, the diner was still. Empty, but not hollow. Illa wiped the counter not because it needed cleaning, but because it was ritual. It grounded her. Beside a photo of her mother hung the black leather vest. Friend of the Hells Angels, protected. A note pinned to it read, Thank you for seeing the man, not the patch. Jessie. She had held the vest for a long time before hanging it, felt its weight, knew what it meant. The bell above the door jingled. Illa didn't turn right away. She folded the rag first, then she looked up. Sheriff Brent Hollis stood in the doorway. No hat, no glasses, no swagger, just a man. He stepped forward slowly. Illa didn't speak. She poured a cup of coffee and set it in front of him. He nodded, sat down. The room was quiet. Finally, Brent spoke. Town's changing. Illa didn't respond. You've got folks talking. Ruth Langley laughing with a biker. Joe Larkin shaking hands with someone inked to the jaw. He shifted. I was raised a certain way. Taught to keep things in line. Trouble shows up, you push back. You don't question it. Just follow the rules. He paused. But maybe some of those rules weren't made for the right reasons. Illa turned toward him. Maybe they were made to protect the wrong people. He nodded slowly. I'm not proud of what I let happen. I saw the fear in that man's eyes. I should have done better. She didn't forgive him. She didn't thank him. She just let the silence do the work. Finally, he took a sip. You ever think about running for town council? She raised an eyebrow. He smiled faintly. Didn't think so. Then he placed his badge on the counter. I'm taking a few weeks off. Maybe longer. I've got some things to unlearn. She looked at the badge, then at him. You don't have to leave. I know, he said. But maybe I should